Who makes the answers? I'll tell you who makes the answers. All the O's, white O's, sperm O, 2-9-year-old. Ask the you old. Who makes the answers?
This lecture builds upon the last lecture about eugenics and social Darwinism to ask the critical question, not who made the Nazis, lecture title, but rather, was it Darwin who made the Nazis? Why would one bother to ask such a question in the first place? Well, put simply, it's a major criticism that has been levelled against Darwin and his theory by left and right, and by creationists too. To elaborate, whether you're Richard Weikart, fellow of the intelligent design think tank the Discovery Centre, or André Pichot, influenced by Marxism and its traditions, you see an unbroken descent, an obvious genealogy between Darwin's theorising and the horrors of Nazi Germany. For both Weikart and Pichot, there's an unequivocal answer to the question, who made the Nazis? Well, they'd say, Darwin made the Nazis, or if not Darwin, Darwinism. Indeed, Weikart, like some of those involved in the sociology and history of science, even eschews the term social Darwinism, because what else could Darwinism be other than social? It was Weikart's work in particular that drew the ire of longtime Darwin scholar Peter Bowler. Indeed, it was Weikart's joining the dots between Darwin, social Darwinism, eugenics and Hitler that goaded Bowler into writing Darwin Deleted. There are withering words to be found about Weikart in Darwin Deleted, but one suspects that these are the mere tip of Bowler's iceberg of anger. So given this, now is as good a time to revisit Darwin Deleted as any. What would the world have looked like without Darwin? Bowler asked counterfactually, therefore diving into the deep end of matters of contingency. Here, contingency really refers to inevitability. Was it inevitable that evolution through natural selection would emerge, Darwin or no Darwin? To this he answers guardedly, probably. The path to natural selection would have been rocky and winding, and the theory wouldn't have looked the same in name or content, but there would have been a force discovered that did the work of natural selection. So, Bowler hedged, with a begrudging nod of the head to scientific realism, there is definitely something out there in nature that resembles the operation of natural selection. He puts forward manifold reasons for this position. There were, for example, no guarantees that Wallace's discovery would have been heeded. And anyway, Wallace himself was more interested in interspecies competition rather than variation within a single species. Neither would he have been able to write with the same authority as Darwin in Origin, not having spent the best part of 20 years thinking about and honing his theory. As Bowler indicates, biology would probably have moved on by the time Wallace had gathered his evidence. Wallace also had some distinctly strong and sometimes strange theological views that kept a place for some type of divine force. Wallace's evolution probably wouldn't have challenged the teleological forces of orthodox biology in the way that Darwin did. And anyway, we can add to all of this. Would anyone have listened to Wallace who, without Darwin, wasn't very well connected in scientific circles? Chances are his paper would have gone the same way as Mendel's, forgotten and then resurrected at a later point. Regardless of Wallace, there was a strong likelihood that biological teleology would have remained for a good deal longer embedded within transformist thinking, while some form of genetics might have controlled our understanding of speciation and dominated the field of evolutionary thinking in the early part of the 20th century. In a way, this aspect of the book was a rescue mission for Darwin's genius, although I wouldn't imagine that Bowler would thank me for saying this, but he really does put forward the view that only Darwin could have come up with Origin in the 1850s. Let's just pause here. I think one of the problems I have with Bowler's work is whether Wallace or De Vries or Weizmann would have been doing the research they were doing in the first place without Darwin. Wallace was inspired by Journal of Researchers, otherwise known as The Voyage of the Beagle, to become a scientist and therefore a collector. Both de Vries and Weismann were working on problems that related to Darwinism, so Bowler might have even underplayed the genius of Darwin. Incidentally, I'm very surprised that he doesn't consider these issues in more detail, but maybe he just doesn't read enough science fiction. Obviously, he does read a bit though. But there were other issues of contingency that were in Bowler's sights, specifically whether all of those nasty things that were said to be the result of Darwin's theory would have happened or not without his theory. Here we refer to the evils that Darwin has routinely been accused of creating by his critics, principally undermining human morality. That's the argument that the materialism implicit in Darwinism makes of humans just another kind of animal, subject to the laws of nature, kill or be killed, and not the laws of God. And from this might flow all of the other bad things, including colonialism and racism, patriarchy, eugenics, and of course, down the track, the atrocities of the Nazis. And on the matter of Darwin's complicity in the evils of the world, Bowler's answer is anything but equivocal. All of this would have happened without Darwin and his theory. Why? Well, nationalism wasn't dependent upon Darwinian theory. It existed before Darwin had put pen to paper. The same was true of colonialism, which was in full swing before Darwin had even got on the Beagle. In fact, the Beagle voyage itself was part of the colonial process. Racism was an everyday fact. You didn't need Darwin's scientific thinking to make it hard and fast. There were plenty of virulently racist people working in the new discipline of anthropology, as well as the older degenerationist tradition going back to Camper, as well as the even older biblical tradition. They all had no need of Darwin to propagate their creed of Anglo-Saxon or Teutonic or Aryan supremacy. At the most, Darwin buttressed these views that already existed. Neither did patriarchy require the services of Mr. Charles Darwin. Rather, he drew from all of these things himself. They were aspects that became embedded in his work because he was a man of his time. Indeed, perhaps even the most socially Darwinian of all concepts, the master narrative of struggle for survival, didn't require Darwin's services. It existed before Darwin, eulogised as a natural law by Herbert Spencer, integral to the Malthusian worldview. The struggle for survival that was embedded in social Darwinian and Nazi rhetoric may have been given a Darwinian veneer or not, but it certainly was not Darwin's love child. And, as you will remember, he was badgered into using the phrase survival of the fittest by Spencer, no doubt eventually giving way to one of his great supporters, who also happened to bore the life out of him. Perhaps it was a case of anything to shut Spencer up. So, is Bowler right? Can Darwinism be exculpated from its connection with Nazism? To answer this question, but also to look in more detail at the views of historians like Weikart, I want to explore in depth the period from 1914 to 1945, the age of world wars and the seeming triumph of human evil that culminated in the horrors of the death camps. It is only by taking this long view that we can tease out the nuances of the debate and begin to offer answers to the question of the extent to which German actions were the result of socially applied Darwinism.